All right, let's get some things in order. Who is ESPN predicting to leave the Indiana Fever in free agency? Who are they predicting to leave all of these teams? This is the most free agents in WNBA history. Everybody is trying to cash in on this new CBA. We got to figure out who is about to be leaving Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever, along with some of the other teams. I think there are a few players that are going to be
the most volatile free agency period in WNBA history just got even more interesting. Because while ESPN is busy predicting who's leaving which teams, there's a story they completely missed. A story about power, about influence, about a second-year player who just did something that's never been done before in this league. Caitlin Clark didn't just save two teammates from uncertain futures. She fundamentally changed how roster decisions get made in Indiana. And if you think that sounds dramatic, you haven't been paying attention to what's actually happening behind closed doors.
Uncertain for the entire league in general, but you're a free agent for the first time. Have you thought about what free agency might look like for you if you'd like to be back?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a restricted free agent, so I think that changes things a little bit, but I've loved my years here in Indiana. So obviously with a lot of uncertainty, you don't know what's to come, but I've built a life here, and I love this franchise. I love the people, I love the fans, so we'll see what comes.
You heard that uncertainty in Kelsey Mitchell's voice. That's the reality for players across this league right now. But here's what makes this different. While Mitchell and dozens of other players are sitting in limbo wondering about their futures, two names suddenly got pulled off the chopping block: Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hall. Not because management had a change of heart, because Caitlin Clark made it happen. And if you believe the story behind the story matters more than the headlines, hit that like button right now. It tells us you're ready to see what the mainstream media keeps missing. Let's connect some dots that ESPN conveniently ignored. For weeks, the narrative around Lexi Hall was basically written. Done deal. She's leaving Indiana. Those emotional Instagram posts, the tearful moments, insiders whispering she'd already picked her next destination. The farewell tour was practically planned, except none of it was true. It was narrative farming, clickbait built on half-quotes and assumptions. Because what actually happened tells a completely different story, a story about leverage that second-tier players simply don't have. Until now, multiple sources confirm Clark went directly to Fever management with a message that wasn't a request, it was a boundary. Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hall are not negotiable. They stay, and suddenly, all those goodbye stories evaporated overnight. Now here's where this gets interesting. Lexi Hall is a restricted free agent, which means Indiana controls her future anyway. They can match any offer sheet she signs elsewhere. So technically, she was never really leaving, but the Fever were absolutely planning to let her walk. Save money, reload with cheaper options, standard rebuilding team behavior. That changed the moment Clark's camp made their position clear. And this is where you need to understand what's really happening in Indiana. This isn't about friendship. This isn't about sentimentality. This is about a franchise learning in real time that they no longer make unilateral decisions, not when their entire operation runs through number 22. The chemistry Clark built with Sophie and Lexi isn't some feel-good story the media likes to push. It's quantifiable. Every time Clark drives and kicks to Lexi, spotting up in the corner, that's 8 months of timing they've perfected. When Sophie crashes the boards and creates second chances, that's understanding each other's rhythms without even looking. You cannot manufacture that in free agency. You cannot draft that. You certainly cannot replace it with some veteran minimum signing who's never played a single minute with your franchise player. But media coverage tried to frame this as emotional rescue. Caitlin saves her friends. Loyalty over logic. Heartwarming, but probably not smart. They completely missed the point. This wasn't emotional. This was strategic. This was a player who just finished dragging a lottery team to the semifinals, recognizing exactly what made that possible. Remember when Clark got hurt late in the season? Sophie was immediately in front of cameras, controlling the narrative, keeping the locker room unified. When Lexi had brutal shooting stretches, Clark kept feeding her the ball until confidence returned. That's the trust you build in the trenches. And that's the trust Clark refused to let management destroy for salary cap gymnastics. Here's the signal everyone should have caught, but somehow didn't. When Lexi posted that uncertain message about her future, Clark commented 3 words: "So proud of you." The media read it as bittersweet goodbye. The front office read it correctly. That was a declaration. That was Clark publicly backing someone, which in the new WNBA landscape means ownership pays attention. Because Caitlin Clark in 2025 is not just a player on the roster, she's a revenue stream worth millions. Her voice carries weight equivalent to any executive in that building. The Fever aren't making decisions based purely on analytics anymore. They're making decisions based on what keeps their generational talent satisfied. And before anyone starts with the LeBron comparisons, let's be clear. LeBron didn't have this kind of organizational influence in year 2. Neither did Steph Curry, neither did A'ja Wilson. This is unprecedented. A player barely past her rookie season dictating roster construction. That's not normal WNBA operations. That's a complete power shift. Indiana went from bottom-feeding franchise to playoff contender in 1 season, not because of some brilliant front office strategy, because of Caitlin Clark. She filled the building. She moved merchandise. She got them national television slots. She made the Indiana Fever relevant again after years of being the league's afterthought. So when she pulls management aside and makes it clear Sophie and Lexi are non-negotiable, that's not a player overstepping. That's a franchise asset protecting her investment. Because make no mistake, that's what this really is. Investment protection.
Really, really good. Actually, I'm just actually really motivated, and I think I'm at a really good spot in my life where like I'm just excited to just like pour into my body, pour into things that I enjoy, and I'm just so excited for this upcoming season because I don't know where I'm gonna be, and I just feel like in the W, your golden years, I would say, is anywhere from 28 to 34.
You heard that motivation, that focus on prime years, that uncertainty about the future. That's the reality for WNBA players in their late 20s right now. Everyone's trying to capitalize on this moment before the next CBA negotiation potentially locks them out. Everyone's looking for security. And what Clark just demonstrated is that if you're in her circle, you have security. Even when conventional wisdom says you shouldn't, Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hall aren't all-stars. They're not going to lead the league in scoring, but they bring something you cannot quantify on a stat sheet: edge, loyalty, the willingness to do the dirty work while the star gets the spotlight. That's what held Indiana together when half the roster was cycling through the injury report. And here's what tells you everything about Clark's basketball: IQ. She recognized that immediately. She didn't need a full season to figure out who her real allies were. She didn't need some veteran to tell her. She watched Sophie step up when everyone else went silent. She watched Lexi maintain composure when the pressure was crushing. And she made a calculation. These are the people who help me win. Now drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Do you think Caitlin Clark was right to use her influence like this? Or is a second-year player wielding this much power dangerous for the league? Because this conversation is about to get much bigger. The money situation is what makes this even more fascinating. Indiana is entering an off-season where their salary cap is absolutely suffocating. They cannot pay everyone. Choices have to be made. And in a normal franchise operation, Sophie and Lexi probably lose that negotiation. Not because they're not valuable, because teams make financial decisions that prioritize flexibility over loyalty. But this isn't a normal franchise operation anymore. This is the Caitlin Clark operation, and the Fever just learned they cannot afford to make any decision that upsets the player who single-handedly revived their entire franchise. Think about the precedent this sets. We're watching a fundamental shift in how WNBA power dynamics work. For decades, players had minimal leverage. Management controlled everything. You played where they told you to play, you accepted the role they assigned, you kept quiet, and collected your paycheck. The new generation is rewriting that entire script. And Caitlin Clark just became the loudest example. She didn't demand a trade. She didn't throw a public tantrum on social media. She simply told her organization what she needed to succeed, and they listened because they had no choice. The Fever were an absolute disaster before she arrived. They didn't just need a point guard. They needed someone who could make people care about Indiana basketball again. Someone with a fan base large enough to fill arenas. Someone with mainstream appeal that transcends the sport. Clark delivered all of that and more. So when she advocates for keeping Sophie and Lexi, management understands the real message. If you want me to keep delivering sold-out crowds and primetime viewership, you protect the ecosystem I've built. You don't dismantle it to save money. Multiple insiders are confirming the Fever had already decided not to match outside offers for Lexi. They viewed her as a defensive specialist coming off the bench, valuable, but replaceable. They expected other teams to bid. They were prepared to let her walk. Standard cost-cutting procedure for a team still supposedly rebuilding. Then Clark's representatives made it clear that approach was unacceptable, and suddenly the entire strategy changed. Suddenly, Lexi Hall became untouchable. Suddenly, Sophie Cunningham's contract became a priority, not because management had some revelation about their value, because the franchise's most important asset drew a line. And here's the part that should terrify the rest of the league. This is just the beginning. Clark is in year 2. Imagine the leverage she'll have in year 5. Imagine the roster control she'll demand when she's ready to sign her next contract. Indiana just showed every team in this league that superstars with mainstream appeal can dictate organizational decisions. That's a bell you cannot unring. Some critics called it favoritism when this news broke. Others said she was being controlling, power-hungry, overstepping her role as a player. But those critics conveniently forget what Clark endured last season. The injuries that destroyed roster continuity, the media circus that followed her everywhere, the physical targeting from opponents, the road environments that turned hostile. She survived that season by having people genuinely in her corner. Sophie was the first voice defending her publicly when critics attacked. When Clark got hammered with cheap shots, Sophie was ready to retaliate. That loyalty doesn't get forgotten. That loyalty gets rewarded. Lexi provided the opposite energy, but equally valuable. Calm, consistent, never complained about her role, never demanded more shots, just executed her assignments and spaced the floor perfectly for Clark's drives. That's the kind of player every superstar needs adjacent to them, someone who understands their role and plays it flawlessly without ego. You cannot replace that chemistry by signing some free agent who's never run a single play with your franchise cornerstone. You cannot trade for trust. And Clark understood that better than anyone in Indiana's front office apparently did. The timing of this move makes it even more significant. We're heading into potentially the most chaotic offseason in WNBA history. The collective bargaining agreement expires soon. Players are bracing for messy negotiations. There's legitimate concern about a lockout in 2026. Nobody wants to be stuck on a team that doesn't value them when the league potentially goes dark. Clark's loyalty move sends a clear message to the entire roster. If you're loyal to me, I will fight for you. In a league where players often feel disposable, where organizations make ruthless financial decisions without considering human elements, that matters enormously. And for a second-year player to already command that kind of organizational respect, that's genuinely historic. Even established superstars like Aja Wilson and Breanna Stewart didn't have this level of influence this early in their careers. They built to it over years. Clark is operating with leverage that typically takes a decade to accumulate. Her reach isn't just about statistics anymore. It's about influence. When she talks, people listen. When she posts, fans react. When she makes demands, ownership acts. This decision keeping Sophie and Lexi changes Indiana's entire trajectory. It means they're prioritizing chemistry over financial flexibility. It means they're actually listening to the players who make them watchable. It means they're acknowledging their championship window is open right now, not in some theoretical future rebuild. Clark is entering her prime. Aaliyah Boston is dominating inside. The league is finally paying attention to Indiana basketball. You don't sacrifice that to save money off the salary cap. You protect it. You build around it. You give your franchise player the support system she's explicitly requesting. And yes, this effectively makes Caitlin Clark the unofficial general manager of the Indiana Fever. Not on paper, but practically. Because would this have happened if anyone else requested it? Absolutely not. If Sophie or Lexi had approached management alone, they'd probably be replaced by cheaper options already. But with Clark behind them, suddenly they're core culture pieces. Suddenly, they're untouchable. That's real power. And it's a reminder of how rapidly the WNBA power structure is evolving. This isn't the old league where players kept quiet and followed orders. The new generation, led by voices like Clark, is transforming how front offices operate. They're not just athletes collecting paychecks. They're stakeholders with leverage. If you found this breakdown valuable, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because we're tracking every move this offseason, and trust me, this story is just getting started. Next up, we're exposing which Fever player might actually be leaving despite Clark's influence, and why it could destroy everything she just built. The Indiana Fever are no longer a rebuilding project. They're a contender being shaped by the most powerful voice in women's basketball. And management just learned the most important lesson. When Caitlin Clark draws a line, you respect it, because losing her trust means losing everything that makes this franchise relevant. This is how dynasties get built, not by constantly churning rosters, by protecting the chemistry that actually wins games. Caitlin Clark just forced Indiana to learn that lesson, and the rest of the WNBA is watching very carefully.